Mazda is a dangerous brand to judge by the badge alone. Some Mazdas feel like secret used car bargains. They look premium, drive sharply, and make Toyota shoppers wonder if they have been buying the safe choice too quickly. Other Mazdas can punish the wrong buyer so badly that the words "reliable Japanese car" start sounding like a setup. That is what makes this verdict interesting. Today, we are looking at the 4 Mazdas I would actually feel good buying, then the 3 Mazda vehicles I would be very careful owning. The first one looks like a cheap crossover bargain, until the repairs explain the discount. Worst number 3, Mazda CX-7. The Mazda CX-7 is the kind of used SUV that can tempt the wrong buyer very quickly. It has the Mazda badge, it has the crossover shape, it looks more interesting than a plain family SUV. Find a turbocharged version for cheap, and it can feel like you discovered a hidden performance bargain hiding behind ordinary used car prices. That is where the problem begins. The CX-7 is not here because every single one is terrible. Some owners have kept them running well, especially with careful maintenance, regular oil changes, and realistic expectations. As a used purchase, though, it carries too much risk for the average person who simply wants easy Mazda ownership. This was not Mazda at its simplest. The turbocharged 2.3-liter engine gave the CX-7 personality, yet personality can get expensive. Turbo engines need clean oil, proper warm-up, good cooling, and owners who do not ignore small symptoms. Many CX-7s did not get that life. They were bought like normal crossovers and maintained like normal crossovers. That is when the trouble starts. Timing chain concerns, turbo wear, oil consumption, suspension wear, and transmission complaints can turn this cheap SUV into a repair counter regular. The buyer sees a Mazda crossover for less money than a CX-5 and thinks they are being clever. A cheap purchase price is not the same as cheap ownership. That is the lesson with the CX-7. It can look like the smart deal until the first expensive repair reminds you why some used cars depreciate harder than others. The fuel economy does not help either. A thirsty, aging, turbocharged crossover with a complicated history is not the relaxing daily driver many people think they are buying. The CX-7 has charm. That is the dangerous part. It feels like Mazda tried to make a family SUV with a pulse instead of another rolling appliance. The problem is that interesting is not always what you want when a vehicle is older, used, and already carrying years of unknown maintenance. A clean CX-7 can still feel convincing because the problems are not always visible at the surface. That is why inspection matters more than excitement here. Look for smoke, rough starts, oil leaks, neglected cooling parts, strange shifts, turbo noises, and service gaps. A buyer may think the risk is exaggerated because the car still starts, drives, and looks fine during a short test drive. That is how old turbo cars win arguments. They rarely reveal the full story in 10 minutes around the block. They reveal it after heat, mileage, neglect, and overdue repairs all meet at once. If you are an enthusiast who knows the engine, checks service records, gets a proper inspection, and has money ready for repairs, maybe it makes sense. For most buyers, I would walk away. The CX-7 is the Mazda that teaches a painful rule. A used car can be cheap for a reason. With this one, the reason may not show up until after it is already sitting in your driveway. The CX-7 is risky because it mixed family SUV duties with turbo complexity. The next Mazda is risky for the opposite reason. People buy it because it feels special, then discover special does not mean simple. Worst number 2, Mazda RX-8. The Mazda RX-8 is not a boring mistake. That is what makes it so dangerous. A boring bad car warns you early. It feels cheap, it feels dull, it feels forgettable. The RX-8 does the opposite. It feels special. The steering is sharp, the chassis is balanced, the rear hinge doors make it weird in a good way. The rotary engine revs in a way normal piston engines do not. The whole car feels like Mazda built it for people who still care about driving. That is how it traps people. Used RX-8s can look shockingly affordable. Someone sees the price and thinks they have found a cheap sports car. They imagine weekend drives, high revs, rear-wheel drive, and Mazda handling. What they forget is that the RX-8 is not a normal used car. It is a rotary car. That changes everything. The rotary engine needs a different kind of owner. It needs oil attention, ignition health, cooling discipline, warm-up awareness, and most importantly, compression health. A weak rotary can still look tempting, still start sometimes, still sound interesting, and still be on the edge of becoming a very expensive problem. Poor hot starts, weak compression, flooding, catalytic converter issues, ignition coil problems, oil consumption, and rebuild costs are all part of the ownership conversation. That does not mean the RX-8 is junk. It means it is not casual. The average used car buyer is not ready for a car that needs a compression test before the emotional part of the purchase even begins. They see a cheap Mazda sports car and think they are getting something like a Miata with extra seats. That is the wrong comparison. The Miata is simple joy. The RX-8 is a specialized relationship. Fuel economy makes the relationship even harder. The car does not have huge torque, yet it can still drink fuel like it has something to prove. That becomes frustrating when the car is being used as a normal daily driver. This is why the RX-8 lands near the bottom of this verdict. Not because it has no soul. It has too much soul for someone who just needs dependable transport. A good RX-8 owned by the right person can be wonderful. A neglected RX-8 bought because it was cheap can become a nightmare. The buying rule is simple: compression test first, service history first, rotary knowledge first, budget first, emotion second. This car also punishes short attention spans. Owners who shut it off cold, ignore ignition parts, or treat oil consumption like a normal nuisance can create problems fast. If you reverse that order, this car can humble you very quickly. The RX-8 is not a Mazda to casually own. It is a Mazda to knowingly adopt. That is the part many buyers refuse to accept. They want the special engine, special sound, special shape, and special experience without the special responsibility. The RX-8 does not allow that. It asks the owner to understand it before trusting it. If you have ever watched someone buy a cheap sports car and call it a bargain before the first repair bill arrived, hit the like button now, because the next Mazda proves a brand new idea can be just as risky as an old enthusiast car. Worst number 1. Mazda CX-90. The Mazda CX-90 is the hardest vehicle to criticize because it is not a bad idea. The idea is actually impressive. Mazda wanted to move upward. A bigger 3-row SUV, a rear-wheel drive-based platform, inline-6 power, a plug-in hybrid option, upscale interior design, more presence than the CX-9, more ambition than the average family crossover. On paper, the CX-90 sounds like Mazda finally challenging premium brands. That is also why I would be careful. The CX-90 is not here because it has no talent. It is here because ownership is not only about talent, it is about trust. Early trust matters. The CX-90 brought new hardware, new powertrains, more electronics, more weight, more complexity, and a more expensive ownership profile. That is a lot for a cautious buyer to accept before the vehicle has years of proven long-term history. When it works, the CX-90 can feel excellent. It drives with more character than many 3-row SUVs. The cabin can feel rich. The inline-6 gives it a different personality from the usual 4-cylinder family haulers. The plug-in hybrid version adds an interesting option for buyers who can actually charge it. The ownership story is still young. That matters because early models have drawn attention for recalls, complaints, software issues, steering concerns, and the kind of teething problems that make cautious buyers nervous. This does not mean every CX-90 is doomed. It means I would not treat it like a proven Mazda yet. That is the point of this verdict. A vehicle can be promising and still be a risky ownership choice. The CX-90 is not a cheap old crossover you buy with small expectations. It is a larger, more premium Mazda that can cost real money if things go wrong outside warranty. The more expensive the vehicle, the less patience owners have for unresolved issues. The plug-in hybrid adds another layer. Battery systems, charging habits, electric range, gasoline engine behavior, software, and hybrid integration all have to work together. If they do, the vehicle feels modern. If they do not, the owner is not dealing with something simple. That is why I would be most cautious with the CX-90 right now. Not because it is the least talented Mazda, it is the biggest gamble. The CX-7 is old risk. The RX-8 is enthusiast risk. The CX-90 is early adopter risk. Early adopter risk can be expensive. If you lease it, stay under warranty, and have a good dealer nearby, the CX-90 may make sense. If you are buying used and planning to keep it for years, I would wait for more real-world data, more updates, and more proof. The frustrating part is that the CX-90 may age into a much better recommendation. Mazda could update software, refine the powertrains, and turn the platform into something excellent. A verdict today has to protect the buyer today. The CX-90 may become a strong Mazda later. Today, if someone asked me for a safe Mazda ownership choice, I would not point them here first. That is the verdict. The CX-90 feels like a Mazda I want to believe in. It is not yet the Mazda I would gamble on. Now that we have handled the 3 Mazdas I would be most careful with, the story changes. The next 4 are where Mazda's personality actually helps ownership instead of making it more complicated. Let's get to it. Best number 4, Mazda 6. The Mazda 6 is one of those cars people appreciate more now that it is gone. When it was still on sale, many buyers ignored it because sedans were losing the popularity war. Crossovers were taking over. People wanted higher seating positions, bigger cargo areas, and the feeling that every family car needed to look like an SUV. As a used car, the Mazda 6 has aged into a very smart choice. It is comfortable without being dull. It looks mature without looking anonymous. It drives better than many family sedans, and it has that Mazda feeling where a normal road becomes slightly more interesting than expected. That is why it begins the good side of this verdict. The Mazda 6 gives you style, comfort, and driving feel without demanding a strange ownership story. The later models especially make sense. You could get a nice interior, good steering, a proper automatic transmission, and a naturally aspirated 2.5-liter Skyactiv engine in many trims. That engine is not exotic, and that is part of the appeal. Not every good car needs to be exotic. Sometimes the best used car is the one that does the normal things well and still gives the driver a little satisfaction. The naturally aspirated Mazda 6 is the safer long-term pick for many buyers. It is smooth, efficient enough, and generally dependable when maintained properly. It does not need to be the fastest sedan in the class to be one of the nicest to live with. The turbocharged Mazda 6 is more tempting. It adds torque and makes the car feel closer to a near-luxury sedan. It also needs more disciplined maintenance. Oil changes, cooling health, and careful ownership matter more. That is the Mazda pattern. The simple version is usually the smarter version. The real strength of the Mazda 6 is balance. It feels more expensive than it often costs. The cabin is nicer than many rivals. The steering has more life than expected. The design still looks clean. Since sedans are not as fashionable as crossovers, used buyers can sometimes find better value. It is not perfect. Paint chips can annoy owners. Some infotainment systems feel dated. Rear seat and cargo space are not SUV-like. Turbo versions cost more to run. Any used sedan still needs a proper inspection. That makes it a quiet bargain for people who do not need an SUV. The Mazda 6 gives enough comfort for long drives, enough style to avoid looking cheap, and enough simplicity to keep ownership from feeling fragile. That matters more than it sounds. The ownership verdict is strong. The Mazda 6 is a grown-up daily driver with a pulse. It is not trying to be weird. It is not trying to be a performance car. It is not trying to be a luxury car with luxury repair bills. It is just a good sedan that Mazda made better than it needed to be. That is why it belongs here. It reminds you that the best Mazda is not always the most dramatic one. Sometimes it is the one that gives you sharp steering, a nice cabin, and fewer reasons to regret the purchase. The Mazda 6 proves a used car does not need hype to be a great choice. The next Mazda is smaller, sharper, and easier to recommend because it gives you Mazda personality in one of the safest packages the brand makes. Best number 3, Mazda 3. The Mazda 3 is one of the easiest Mazdas to recommend because it understands the brand perfectly. It takes a normal compact car and makes it feel more premium, more controlled, and more enjoyable than it needs to be. That is the Mazda 3 formula. A Toyota Corolla may feel like the safest appliance. A Honda Civic may feel like the obvious all-rounder. The Mazda 3 gives the buyer something different. It feels like a compact car built for someone who still cares about the drive. The steering has weight, the cabin feels refined. The exterior design looks more expensive than the price. The hatchback especially has a shape that makes many compact cars look flat and ordinary. This is not only about style. The Mazda 3 is also a strong ownership choice when you pick the right year, engine, and condition. The Skyactiv engines have generally built a good reputation when maintained properly. The automatic transmission is a conventional unit instead of a CVT, and that gives many buyers more confidence. That matters in the compact car world. A lot of people want low running costs, decent reliability, and good fuel economy, but they do not want to feel punished every time they drive. The Mazda 3 gives them that middle ground. It feels nicer than many cars in its class without becoming expensive to own, like a luxury badge. That is the sweet spot. The naturally aspirated Mazda 3 is usually the easiest long-term recommendation. It gives you most of what makes the car good with fewer worries. The turbo version is quicker, more exciting, and more expensive to feed and maintain. It is the fun choice, not the simplest choice. That distinction matters. Buy the Mazda 3 for balanced ownership, not maximum bragging rights. A naturally aspirated Mazda 3 can commute, road trip, handle daily errands, look good in the driveway, and still make the owner feel like they bought something with taste. This is why condition matters more than chasing the newest badge. A well-maintained Mazda 3 with the right engine can be a better buy than a newer one that was neglected. The car does have weaknesses. Rear seat space can be tight. The hatchback's rear visibility is not great. The ride can feel firm. Some people may prefer a giant touchscreen instead of Mazda's control knob layout. The cargo space is useful, but not class-leading. Those are livability complaints. They are not ownership disasters. Mechanically, the Mazda 3 is one of the brand's strongest choices because it gives you the Mazda feeling without demanding Mazda sacrifices. It is practical enough to be sensible and sharp enough to remind you why you did not buy the coldest appliance in the segment. That is why it sits high on the good side of the verdict. The Mazda 3 is not the biggest Mazda. It is not the fastest Mazda. It is not the flashiest Mazda. It is simply one of the safest ways to enjoy the brand. That is what good ownership should feel like. The Mazda 3 gives you the brand's personality in a safe daily package. The next Mazda does something even harder. It became a small sports car that somehow avoided becoming a financial mistake. Best number 2. Mazda MX-5 Miata. The Mazda MX-5 Miata is the car people joke about until they drive one properly. Then the jokes get quieter. It is small, it is light. It is not powerful in the way internet comments think cars need to be powerful. It will not impress someone who only reads horsepower numbers. That is exactly why it works. The Miata is one of the best Mazda vehicles to own because it keeps the formula honest. Front engine, rear wheel drive, manual or automatic, lightweight, good balance, proven engines, reasonable running costs, huge parts support, massive owner community. That combination is rare. Most fun cars become expensive because they chase speed. Bigger engines, more boost, more heat, more tires, more brakes, more electronics, more repair bills. The Miata does not need all that. It wins by staying light. A good Miata makes a normal road feel special without needing illegal speeds. You can enjoy the steering, the gearbox, the balance, and the open roof without pretending you're on a racetrack. That is the kind of fun that does not bankrupt the owner. Ownership is also helped by the fact that Miata buyers usually care about the cars. Many are maintained by enthusiasts. Parts are available. Knowledge is everywhere. Problems are well documented. If something goes wrong, you are not alone. A car with a strong community is easier to own because the mistakes have already been discovered by someone else. That matters more than people realize. The secret is that the Miata does not pretend to be practical. It knows exactly what it is. That honesty protects the owner from bad compromise. The Miata is not perfect. It is small, it is noisy, it has limited storage. It is not ideal for families. Rust can be a serious issue on older cars, especially in harsh climates. Modified examples need careful inspection because not every previous owner improved the car. As a Mazda ownership choice, the Miata is hard to beat. It is fun without being fragile, affordable without feeling cheap, simple without feeling boring. That is why it ranks so high. The Miata is not for everyone, but for the right person, it may be the most satisfying Mazda ever built. Here is the important part. It does not need excuses. You do not say, "It is good, but watch the engine." You do not say, "It is fun, but the transmission might ruin you." You do not say, "It is cheap, but you need a specialist for everything." You just need to buy a clean one, avoid abused modifications, check for rust, and maintain it properly. That is rare. The Miata is proof that the best performance car is not always the fastest one. Sometimes it is the one you can enjoy for years, without fearing the next invoice. Comment Miata if you think Mazda's smallest sports car is still one of the smartest cars the brand ever made. Because number 1 is not a sports car, but it might be the best Mazda for real life. Best number 1. Mazda CX-5. The Mazda CX-5 wins because it is the Mazda most people can actually live with. That sounds simple, but it matters. A great ownership car is not only the one enthusiasts praise, it is the one that works on Monday morning, handles bad weather, carries people, feels nice inside, does not drive like punishment, and still makes the owner feel like they bought something better than average. That is the CX-5. It became Mazda's modern sweet spot. Compact SUV size, upscale interior, sharp steering, available all-wheel drive, strong safety reputation, proven engines, good resale appeal, enough practicality for normal life without becoming huge and dull. The CX-5 is not perfect, but it is the Mazda that best combines what buyers actually want. That is why it takes number 1. The naturally aspirated 2.5-liter engine is the safer long-term pick for most owners. It is not the fastest, but it is simpler, efficient enough, and generally dependable when serviced properly. The 6-speed automatic is not the most modern transmission on paper, but that is part of the charm. It feels conventional, familiar, and less annoying than many CVTs. For buyers who want the least stressful ownership, the non-turbo CX-5 is the smarter choice. The turbocharged CX-5 is more exciting. It gives the vehicle the torque many people wish small SUVs had. Like every turbo car, it needs more disciplined maintenance and will cost more to feed, fuel, and repair over time. That does not make the turbo bad, it just makes the non-turbo easier to recommend. The CX-5 also has the thing Mazda does better than most brands. It makes an ordinary vehicle feel a little special. The steering has weight, the cabin feels more premium than many competitors, the seating position feels natural, the exterior design has aged well. This is why people buy one, and then recommend it. It feels like a small luxury SUV without the luxury brand punishment. That is a powerful ownership formula. That broad appeal is what separates the CX-5 from more emotional Mazda choices. It is not the car that wins every argument online. It is the car that keeps making sense after the argument ends. There are things to watch. Some owners complain about paint chips, infotainment quirks, road noise, brake wear, and cargo space that is not as generous as boxier rivals. A used CX-5 still needs inspection, service history, and the right price. The big picture is still very strong. The CX-5 is one of the safest Mazda bets because it is not trying to be too clever. It is not a first-year premium experiment. It is not a rotary passion project. It is not an old turbo crossover with complicated history. It is a well-rounded Mazda that fits real life. That is why it beats the Miata for number 1. The Miata may be more fun, but the CX-5 is easier to recommend to more people. A student, a small family, a commuter, a couple, or someone downsizing from a larger SUV can all understand the CX-5 quickly. It does the normal jobs well and still gives the driver a little Mazda flavor. That is what ownership should feel like. A vehicle does not have to be perfect to be the best choice. It has to give back more than it takes. The CX-5 does that better than any Mazda on this list. Drop a comment with the Mazda you think belongs on the best or worst side. If you want to see the Japanese SUVs, I would actually trust used. Click the video on the left. If you want more honest car verdicts before you buy the wrong vehicle, hit subscribe. I will see you in the next one.